Hey everybody, I'm back talking with Tad Haas, who's been a longtime collaborator and a friend, and we've shared some ideas back and forth a few times. Tad's with Edison365, and I've invited him here today to talk about a subject I think is near and dear to both our hearts, and hopefully for some of you who are watching, you'll be interested as well. And that's the question, okay, there's a lot of innovation software out there. What does it actually do, and how does it help corporations become more successful and innovate? So Tad, give us a little introduction to yourself and your company, and then let's jump in.
Fantastic. Jeffrey, as always, thank you. It's great for us to reconnect. I appreciate and enjoy it every single time. So again, my name is Tad Haas. I'm Executive Vice President with Edison365. We are indeed one of those software companies, and I get the privilege of working with corporate innovators really every single day. And whether they're 100,000 person corporations or 1,000 person enterprises, we're helping those customers through the deployment of software because it's just really one of the ways that we find that we can help, that innovators can get value in the things that they're trying to do and prove that value, I think, which is one of the most important outcomes.
Great. Well, I know a lot about innovation. You know a lot about innovation. We think about it as people who are creating new ideas. And one of the questions I think a lot of people may have, and some people are using software, but a lot of people may have is, okay, so I have an idea, how does software help me? So let's talk a little bit about what is a software platform? How does it either improve innovation or help companies do a better job innovating? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think what I'll do is frame it in a couple of ways. One, it's not just about the idea. Right. In fact, more importantly, it's really about the outcome of those ideas. The way we change corporate culture, the way we make money or save money or drive value, transform our business model. It's the real outcome of those ideas that matters the most. So I'll really try to highlight on that. Second of all, I think that when you take that end goal in mind, you have to realize it's not just about capturing ideas. It's actually about the end-to-end process. How do we front-end innovation by thinking collaboratively, by taking good ideas and making them great, but then also experimenting with them, proving their value fast enough as small little experiments, and then scale them up to corporate enterprise projects that change the market, bring new things to bear, or in today's market, quite topically, is how do I go through and improve my supply chain, right? How do I work with my partners that are outside of my company to go through and add value? And so it's a full end-to-end process from definition of the strategy all the way through to the delivery of that value.
Well, you know me, I perk up in my chair whenever anybody talks about an innovation process, because that's sort of where I staked my career, not so much on the software side, but more on how to define an innovation process and think about it from an end-to-end perspective. You said something I think is true, and I was trying to provoke you a little bit about talking about, it's not just idea capture, right? I can capture ideas in a spreadsheet. So it's really about creating a robust experience. So let's talk about how does software enhance the success of an innovation capacity or competency in a business? What do you think? Where do you think some of the factors lie?
I appreciate that question. Certainly it's one that our corporate customers ask us every day. I had the privilege of doing a session last week, might have been the week before, with Cisco through Innovation Leader and some of the things that they do. And Cisco was talking about that end-to-end value. So it's a really good example of the case study. And that was a full hour topic, so I won't try to cram it all into 10 minutes here. But I will frame things up kind of in 4 value chains or 4 considerations. First is software is a very good tool to land the cultural change most corporate innovators are trying to affect. It's the thing that they're trying to make happen. And yeah, you can do spreadsheets and you can email things around and you can get together for a hackathon or a design thinking session, whatever may be the case. But how do you land it permanently? How do you give people a place to go so they can capture the ideas, share the ideas, and progress these ideas and these innovations and outcomes? And that really helps drive sort of participation from the community. when you put something out there socially and you do it digitally, it can encompass and incorporate people that might not be in the same room that you're in. It's a way to digitally land your hackathon, right? So if I do a hackathon, great, where do I shove all those ideas and what do we do with them? Or because of COVID, I can't do them in the old-fashioned way I used to inside the same room. I now need to do them separately, and I need to have a place where everyone can go and make sure that they see that. And so I think landing culture and giving people a place to go is the first most important thing. In our software, we use things like leaderboards, we use gamification, we have an awards set up. So all those different capabilities can help you incent participation. And by getting more people involved, having senior leaders engage in the tool and then be visible to the employees, that's a real key way to change and land that culture.
I think you've hit on an interesting point that I noticed. A lot of innovation projects tend to be discrete activities, so it's a one-off, and then you might do a little work as a team and you might not work or meet for a while and then you work again. So it's in and out, in and out, in and out, and it's so you lack this sort of continuous flow, continuous connection. And I think people get a little disjointed because of that, and software I think can help create a little bit more tie together, a little more continuity, if you would, and to your point, a little bit more of a place, because a lot of organizations don't really have a place for innovation to occur. Even though it's a virtual place, at least it's a place, and that's better than no place at all.
Well, and certainly the pandemic really reinforced that, where lots of companies have made fancy innovation for show labs in some places, or they have really good landed innovation in maker spaces or design workshops and things that they do on a regular basis. We still need a way to go through and do that digitally and make it land. And that's really the second thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is kind of that single pane of glass, that one place to go to really understand what's going on. If I'm a senior leader in most companies, I got too much to do, there are too many things grabbing for my attention, and I need to know that there's one place that I can go to understand what's taking place in my innovation team, what's the progress of the core strategies and the portfolio as we wanted to define it. And then ultimately, which will kind of be my third key point, is what are the outcomes of the effort and how are we proving that? Ideas are really easy to capture. You mentioned a spreadsheet. I can drop up any old page and capture ideas. It's more the point about how do you collaborate on those ideas and take good ones and make them great. Or you rapidly get opinions on them through star ratings or voting systems or collaborative chats or polls or all of that. Those are things that software like ours and others, there's lots out in the market, do. And so that's step one. Step two, of course, is evaluating those ideas.
Sure.
And you probably have seen this in your customer realm. It's the decisioning around ideas that's hard, yes? I mean, how do you go through and do it consistently? That'll be my fourth point. You might have a great idea where you get the attention of the CEO, at which point your thing moves forward. But how do you make sure that all of the good ideas get the same level of attention that they need so that they can either get addressed and dealt with immediately, tabled for when the time is right, or properly rejected so you don't waste corporate time and resources on that? Sometimes it's about experimenting quickly. Sometimes it's about scaling up and everything in between that. So you need to have a way to be able to triage all of those new opportunities, make decisions about them, understand how you made that decision and get it through the right workflow so that everybody is involved that needs to be. It's never a question of who's got the ball. Right. And then, once you make a decision, actually executing on that so that you can begin the process of the experiment or deliver on the project as you're scaling out to the enterprise with a new product, a new market, or a new way of doing business, for example. And so I think that ability to ideate, to make decisions, improve the business case of something, and then ultimately deliver on the project portfolio and bring those innovations to delivery is really the second key thing I would mention. One place to look.
Well, you've talked about a lot there in that, and there's two things that I'd want to reinforce. One is the portfolio. I think it's really important for companies. Many companies still aren't thinking about, they think about a product portfolio, but they're not really thinking about an investment portfolio of new ideas. And I think it's probably just as important, if not more important, to think about what do we have in the pipeline that's coming that's going to drive new revenue or create new differentiation, and creating a portfolio. But the second idea there is transparency. How do I go to one place and see my investments? You know, that this whole idea about creating transparency about all the investments, all the work we're doing, instead of it being tucked away in 5 different databases or 5 different spreadsheets on 6 different people's machines, now we have a lot more visibility to that. And I think that that's another thing that I think your product or any software product can create, is a lot more visibility and transparency to what I think can become a little bit under the cover work.
That makes some people nervous. Not everybody likes transparency.
Well, you know, I think you need some of that, but yeah, I'm sure you have governance in your product, and we'll talk about governance in a second, to allow who can see what.
Yeah, one of the things that we do, because we're built on Office 365, we take into account the way people are set up in their Microsoft world and their audiences and their groups, and then we set other controls on top of that. So even for some of the world's biggest corporations, we're set up to help and support that. What you sort of pinged me on or reminded me of there was this idea of the portfolio. And you know, the H1, H2, H3 transformations that we as innovators talk about regularly, or whatever naming convention you want to use for that these days, you know, that's really important, because you have to put a place in the corporate budget for these spends. And then you need to be able to say, here's what we've got in this bucket, that bucket, or the other bucket. And then of course, there will always be these, oh my gosh, the pandemic hit. Now we've got a whole nother set of challenges we have to deal with. And the good thing about software is it's flexible enough to say, oh, so you don't just have 3 buckets. Now you've got a supplier bucket problem. Like, how do we make that better? And, you know, we have customers today, you know, big food group companies are going through, and consumer product companies are very focused on their supply chain and how to be more efficient. Costs have skyrocketed for getting things to market. You know, the healthcare space has really been one where Edison has done particularly well. And same thing there. Our medical devices companies, our hospitals are all trying to figure out how to compress time to market, you know, reduce costs, and everything they're doing. So now collaboration is not just internally, but now it's open innovation that lets them work with their partners directly.
You said something I wanted to go back to as well about governance, because that's another area that I think is sort of sorely misunderstood in the innovation world, because nobody likes governance. You don't like Washington, D.C. telling you what to do. You don't like your executives telling you what to do. But governance is something that's really critical from an innovation perspective, because it's so poorly understood. There's so much risk that I think Ralph and I in a previous conversation, Ralph Orr and I in a previous conversation, talked about the gap between the front end and the product development, and call that, you know, that I like to call that the transom problem. And one of the issues is, how do we take good ideas and take them through some gating factor and then move them over into product development? And one of the ways I would imagine that software can help is by providing more visibility, by providing a portfolio, and by providing a common set of decision criteria, right? Instead of my idea being favored over yours because you know the CEO better than I do, but hey, there's a common set of criteria. Better ideas that are more appropriate for the time or the place may move through that funnel faster. Is that a value proposition for software?
100%, and specifically because you know, it's right sized and it's repeatable. You brought up a very interesting topic about the language of innovation. And because we work with corporations around the world, we get to see what words they put on there, right? By default, our software defines challenges and ideas. But if someone's biggest problem are, IT opportunities and they're going through a digital transformation, they might not call them ideas or challenges. They might call these, a project request or a, digital transformation work stream or workload. So the portfolio is defined that way versus a new product company, which is putting features into capabilities or bringing something new to market. So changing the terminology, but making it consistent in your company helps you land that culture, get the consistent terminology so we all know what we're talking about. And so that governance, I think, is very, very key. You brought up transparency multiple times now. And so I'll put visibility on top of that. And then I'll add automation. You talk about gates and moving things through. Well, you want to have the right level of automation so that when a decision is made, all of the next level stakeholders get involved. That when you decide this is kind of cool, we're going to give it a little bit of budget, but now we want to see what happens next, right, that you can track against that, right? What's the steps, the stages, the spend, and all of that. Not SAP accounting, actual tracking. We don't want to do that in innovation. We want the right level of governance and the right level of automation. So I think that those are very key. And thank you for hitting on those.
No, and the last thing I'll say is it really struck me that as I was thinking about and listening to your discussion around what these software products do, that in some ways they're the glue. They're the glue between the people, the process, the ideas. They're sort of connecting everything. And I would imagine if a software is a good software, it's in the background, always active, always working, but it's not predominant in your thinking. That it's the underlying, if you will, almost like a backplane in a semiconductor world. It's a backplane on which everything rests. Is that a reasonable?
It's a great way to look at it. And for us, because we're built in and on the Microsoft platform, I hate to keep harping on that, but it's important relative to adoption. If you're already in Office 365 and logged into that world, then why not just keep doing that? It's inside your everyday thinking. It's directly there. It's on your browser page that you're going to hour after hour. It's in your Microsoft Teams. It's directly there on that front. The last thing that I would say, kind of framing up these 4 key items, is really about proof of value. And if I'm the chief innovation officer of a company, I have to every day, every quarter, every year, defend my budget, defend my people, ask for more, get it, just like every other corporate department. Different in some ways, but very similar in others. And we like to kid ourselves as innovators and think we just, get to draw on whiteboards all day long and talk about cool stuff. But the truth is we have to be good corporate players to get things in and to get them to scale, right? We might be out in our own lab and not have to worry about it, but even then somebody's usually approving the budget somewhere. And so for us, how are you doing against the defined metrics? What are the goals? What's the velocity? What are the targets? What are the key metrics you care about? And then being able to serve those up in a dashboard, in a scorecard, in a report that I can just as easily get on my phone as I can in a meeting or delivered through PowerPoint or directly from a browser page. And so in our world, what we've done working with all these different companies globally is there's a set of best practices, there's a set of views and reports and dashboards that we see people want. And so we created those out of the box. That's cool. Every software company does that. So that's not particularly unique on our side. But what is helpful is then being able to go back and quickly tailor those so that they're unique to your particular enterprise. Some people are more focused on cost containment, so they're going to have a lot more budget kind of concerns. Other people want to see more Wordle diagrams and start talking about, what ideas are coming up, what things should we be scouting for, what are the challenges we should be thinking about for the next quarter or the next quarter or the next. And so it's really this variation. The last thing I'll say about that is this notion of landing culture. Today, we live in a world where it is just as easy for me to go get things self-service through whatever system of tools I'm using, but yet the senior most people in the company don't. they ask you for an email update, they'll, say, send me a report, or they'll ask for an update through the status, update through Microsoft PowerPoint and stuff like that. If the software is good and the reports are accurate, then people will come to those tools in a self-serve way. And it's another way to land your cultural change and the proof of value. We talk about it as benefits identification, benefits tracking, attributing risk to the benefits tracking. Are we going to hit it or aren't we going to hit it? You promise something up front, but what's reality tell us once we're in market? And so those are all things that can quickly be assessed and presented through dashboards.
Well, we've talked around a lot of topics around software. I'm going to begin to draw this to a close. We talked about things like the culture, the single pane of glass, and some other ideas. I threw out the idea of the backplane, or the sort of glue that holds everything together. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave everyone with?
Well, I might use the glue that holds everything together, because I think that's another really good way to reference it and talk about it. I would just say that in software, sometimes we over-engineer our thinking. We get used to big corporate systems and we overthink it. Sometimes it's just important with software to get started, right? See what works, see what sticks, and then if it's too much or too little, adjust. And software today is very flexible and allows you to right size the governance, right size the scale, right size the audience, as your innovation pace dictates and as your corporate need for proof requires. So I would certainly say the best thing to do is just get started no matter what you do, no matter what tool you use. That's a thing to do.
Okay, so as we wrap up, if people see this video and like to get in touch with either Edison365 or you, how would they get in touch with you?
Edison365.com is obviously our visible landing page all around the globe. So go to Edison365.com. I can be reached at tad.haas, tad.haas, Haas, at Edison365.com at any time. I'll drop you my phone number too. I won't try to do that here. But if people want to give me a call directly, they're certainly welcome to. Love talking about this. Love connecting our customers and really just working with the community at large. So thank you for asking, Jeffrey. It's really cool to reconnect yet again.
Glad to do it. And I think we'll wrap there. Thank you.
Thank you.